top.
Yeah.
Israel, Palestine. Let's go. Give me your take.
Israel, Din and Palestine, for me, I can't claim really much knowledge about it, but I know that it's an ongoing conflict. I remember being a boy on the back of the van, as it was my taxis, but I would hear growing ups, and this is back in Eastern Cape now, in the village while I was a boy. I would hear growing ups talking about the Middle Eastern conflict. And this is what they would actually, show off and shine as though they were smart by having these conversations. What I'm saying is at that time I was only 13, 14. I was just a young boy. This thing, it's an old battle. So there's a huge room here for anyone to be biased. I want to be honest with you. I hate the fact that the South African government is siding with the with the Palestinians.
Why do
I
you
don't
think that
know if
they
I'm
side with the Palestinians? Have you
because
any idea?
I see the battle as a religious one. I feel like our government has taken a side on the religious landscape.
Okay, it might be. I think that we can also look at historically. Yasser Arafat, who was the Palestinian Liberation Organization leader, supported the
You know the
ANC.
story.
He
Nelson
supported the
Mandela was very
ANC.
fond
So
of
there's a
him.
loyalty there. And then obviously Israel was more supportive of the apartheid white regime South African government. That's also a contributing factor to, let's say, historical loyalties. But we got to kind of break the biases of the historical loyalties to examine where it's like thinking human beings, where the position might be today. So you mentioned a religious conflict. Um, and from a standpoint, who do you think's right? Who do you think's wrong? Why? Or and that's a hell of a question because there's so many complexities to it, and it's been oversimplified. But what are your thoughts?
Okay, number one, I think it's very clear to see that Israel has never seen peace as a state. The Israeli people, the Jewish people, you study the history. For me and the way I think, already they are the group I'm going to sympathize with because there is so much that is of God around and surrounding them, and there are too many miracles that they have experienced in situations like this. They have always been oppressed. The Israelites are the ones who are coming from Egypt, who were enslaved in Egypt. God even opened the. So I think about this conflict as a religious one. And I think about the command that God gave to Abraham that I will give to you this land. And then we know who was the legitimate son. We know who was the legitimate son. It was Isaac. And Ishmael was not the legitimate son. And so I see the Palestinians and the Islamic wing in this conflict as something that comes from Ishmael, a son of an illegitimate woman, wife, or whatever. He was never an heir. I'm saying this thing because to me, this I deal with it every day. We go on the taxi. In Cape Town, there are taxis that you predominantly are going to be dealing with coloreds, and these colors they tend to be Muslims in Cape Town, and so there is this radio that keeps on banning everybody. There is this radio that keeps on inviting people to bed talk in Sea Point, even your Woolworths and all that, because they are from Israel. This attack now is no longer a militant thing or anything. It's getting to be social and all that. They need us to get involved and buy in. Like, what's going on here? This is a religious battle. Convert me first before you ask me to fight your cause.
I think it's so easy to get caught up in the complexity of the religious, the historical, let's say, factors in the midst of the war in the Middle East. I want to try and simplify it because when it first started happening, I didn't really know what to think about it. Certainly, the attack on October 7th was horrific. It was easy to have an opinion about that. And then it was easy to have an opinion that Israel should defend itself. But the way that Israel's gone about it has made it very, very difficult to contend with. And, there is a religious aspect to it, but there's also, let's say there's a physical aspect to it as well. You mentioned earlier, Israel's always been at war. Now, Israel as the nation has only been there since 1948. In 1948, in May 1948, Israel declared themselves a nation, a state, according to the British Mandate of Palestine. Now, they called it the British Mandate of Palestine. They didn't call it the British Mandate of Jordan and Israel, which is the area of Palestine. France had the mandate of Transjordan, and England had the mandate of the Israel, what we now call the Israel side of Jordan. And they, as a charter, gave Israel the right to determine themselves as a state, and they did in May 1948. And 1 week later, Israel was attacked by 5 of its neighbors. 5 of its neighbors attacked it literally 1 week later. And that's when a lot of the Palestinians in Israel got displaced. And it's also when a lot of the Jews in the rest of the Arab world, the previous Ottoman Empire, got displaced and were thrown out of the Arab regions. There was about 1 million of the Palestinians displaced, just under 1 million Jews that were thrown out of the rest of the Arab world. Some of them went to Israel, which backfired on the Arab region because it solidified Israel, and others went to different parts in the world as well. But they were attacked immediately. So if you zoom out of the situation, you look that Israel is not the majority in this conflict. They are the minority in this conflict. And that's an observation, not a criticism of any of the two. That's the first thing. They are the overwhelming minority in the region. And secondly, what's causing the war is that the nations around Israel refuse to accept and acknowledge their right to exist as a state. Observation, not a criticism, once again. Whether they should accept them as a state or shouldn't accept them as a state is the debate. But that's what's causing the war. Now, the countries that have subsequently, like, for example, Egypt, have acknowledged their right to exist and accept them as a legitimate state. And that happened, I think, in 1973. And then a couple of years back, there were the Abrahamic Accords, where another 5 Muslim nations, I think it was 5, accepted their right to exist and acknowledged them as a state. So simply, if we want to end the continued attacks against Israel, and I'll qualify why I say it that way. We want to end the continued attacks against Israel and have peace with Israel. One way of doing it is that all the Arab nations that surround it just accept their right to exist.
Yeah.
If they accept their right, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
If they accept their right to exist, they acknowledge their right to exist, and they accept them as a legitimate state, the war ends immediately. Israel doesn't carry on retaliating against anybody because nobody's attacking them anymore.
So Israel is defending itself here.
Yes. But the way that they're doing it at the moment can only be justified if you zoom in. And the only way to work this conflict out is to zoom out. And that's what I think people are missing. If you zoom in and you see this war as just about Gaza against Israel, you can almost justify what Israel is doing. They have to wipe out Hamas because Hamas continue to attack them. But the problem is that Hamas is not acting on behalf of the Gazan people. Hamas is acting on behalf of Iran and other Arab nations who want to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews. It's in their mandate to do so. They want to obliterate the Jews. Okay, so if you zoom out, you can see that. And then the questions start changing slightly. So I said the one way for there to become peace in that region is for the Arab nations that surround Israel accept and acknowledge their right to exist and accept them, acknowledge them as a state, a legitimate state. Nobody therefore attacking them anymore. The war will end. It'll immediately end because Israel will attack no one. They would be stupid to attack anyone when they're surrounded by 1.2 million Arabs, Muslims, who most of them want them dead. Okay, so if that's what's creating
Yeah.
the conflict. So now the question becomes, should Israel be a state in that area? Because it's like the pigeon amongst the cats, not the cat amongst the pigeons. It's like informing a state in Israel in that region, which they might have a legitimate right to historically or not. That's a separate debate. But where we face at the moment is if you take Israel and you chuck it right in the middle of the people who all of them around them absolutely hate them and want them dead, I think that's a bad idea. So Zionism, I don't support the idea of Zionism in its current form, that they have the right to have their own state and that it should be Israel where it is today. Now, I'm not against it, but I can't say that I support it because this conflict is dragging the rest of the world into the same war. And our sons and our daughters and our husbands and our fathers are going to have to go to war over this potentially.
You know, that's exactly where I was thinking about this. You know, Israel is such a big topic in the world today. I mean, every part of the world, I'm sure, talks about Israel, and somebody's got a side to the story. And you know, but at the same time, the damage that is happening in the Middle East is nowhere close to the damage that's happening because of what's happening in the Middle East on the bigger world. You know, it's like this little poison that is able to polarize everybody around the world.
The sound went off there. Just repeat that last two lines. The sound went off.
No. I'm saying Israel is like this little poison, right? The Middle East. It's such a small region, and yet it's able to poison the whole world and polarize everybody. Yeah, you know, and I think that is because we try and avoid the facts. We try and avoid the facts. I'm the firm believer that anyone who looks for wisdom uh, regarding the things that are happening in the Middle East, regarding the wars and the end times and all that, you have to look at the Bible. Where did it start? How is it said to be about to continue? You know, so I view it in a very prophetic sense because you know everything that's happening, we turning against and all that, siding with Russia, all those everything that's happening behind the scenes. I feel like it's setting the scene for something.
Very much so. You know, it's Israel has been a major success story from day one, and it's been a major disaster from day one because they've managed to achieve as a people. This is what's so irritating about the Jews. They're a minority. They've always been a minority. They are a tiny population wherever they live and wherever they go. Yet they are highly successful.
You can't ignore them.
No, because they're everywhere. You know, if you look at the leaders of most of technologies and innovation, and I mean Albert Einstein and blah. You know, they wherever they go, being such a tiny population, it's very irritating. They always do incredibly well. You know, you're in Cape Town now, but we met each other in the Garden Route, and over the mountain in the Klein Karoo, you've got Oudtshoorn. Oudtshoorn should never be a significant town in any form or fashion. But there were a few Jewish guys who came to Oudtshoorn and decided to make the ostrich industry an industry. And they made it successful. They became wealthy on
Imagine.
ostriches. Nobody had ever farmed ostriches in the way that they did before, and they did it. And now everybody's feather dusters are ostrich feathers. And now people are eating ostrich meat. And we got ostrich eggs as souvenirs in lounges all over the world that are painted, and people pay thousands of rands for them. That was the Jews.
It's a
The
big,
Jews
it's a
did that.
big deal.
They're very irritating in that way. Now, I'm empathetic to the Jews. I've got a lot of Jewish friends. I'm empathetic to the Jews, firstly, because Christianity owes its origins to Judaism, which we don't have that affiliation with Islam. Islam should have that same affiliation with it, but for some or other reason, they want to kill the Jews. I don't know. Christians used to want to kill the Jews too, not that long ago. Let me not say Christians. Catholics used to want to kill the Jews, okay? Because Catholicism and Christianity isn't mutually exclusive. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
no, it's not
if
the
you
same
take the
thing.
word
It's not the same thing.
Christianity, um, Catholicism is part of that. But if you take Protestant or if you take Anglican, it's also part of it. So Catholicism is not representative of all Christianity like it used to be. Okay, so the Catholics also killed the Jews. Um, and then all around the world, especially when nationalist movements started and people were interested in looking after their own people, Germany, the classic example, they annihilated the Jews. So the Jews have always, but I'm empathetic to the Jews. I'm sympathetic to the Jews. I'm very grateful to the legacy of the Jews, although they can be very, very irritating because they're very, very successful wherever they go.
You know, it's a funny thing. The Jews are very powerful. I don't know whether it's their power or it's the power that is behind them of the God that they serve or they originate from.
There might
I'm
be
saying I'm
a bit
talking
of
about
both.
the freedom.
There might be a bit of both. You know,
Their IQ levels, they seem to be high.
yeah, but you got to
And
you got to consider why, because IQ isn't something that you're necessarily born with. It's also something that is learned. So yes, there's an element of being born with a certain amount of intelligence, but it's also something that's learned. And one of the interesting things about the Jewish people is that in the Torah, they have the ways of God. And from a young age, they're learning it. They're all learning exactly the same ways. So there's a cohesiveness. They are literally a people linked by their religion. So if I'm in South Africa and I go to, let's say, shul, I go to on Sabbath, on the Shabbat, I go to a shul and I listen to the reading in South Africa. And then on Sunday, I fly to America and I meet a Jew in the streets in America. They had the same reading in a different country. Then I fly to Poland and then I find a Jew there. They had the same reading. Now, they might have had a different reflection and perspective on it, but they had the same reading, and they do that from childhood. So they are taught these ways outlined in the Bible, and maybe that contributes to an aspect of intelligence as well. I don't know. I would certainly assume so, because they taught as children words and scriptures and ways of God, and I believe them to be the ways of God. From a very, very young age. And surely if you taught those things, you would be able to work things out better. And maybe the evidence of that is how successful they are. But at the same time, it doesn't make Jewish people good people. You know,
but
even their own
I'm merely
Torah would
looking
say
at
no one's good. Say again.
I'm merely looking at just for me, obviously, because I'm a fan. I'm celebrating the intelligence that seems to be there, because I'm saying it could be that Israel is hated around the world because it beats the odds. When everyone thought Israel was going to be annihilated and out, Israel seemed to have one link. Always that thing that they didn't think about. So in that, I'm saying it's such an intelligent state, because even in these wars, it seems as though we're hating Israel because it's defending itself.
It's going to be tested again. They're under attack now. It's not just in Israel, it's worldwide. The anti-Semitism and the hatred for the Jews has surfaced once more, manifest
Yeah.
massively. This is the problem that I have with what's happening in Israel at the moment, and the response that the leadership of Israel are taking to the attacks from Hamas and in around Gaza. You know, if you zoom in, as I said, if you zoom in, it seems as though what they're doing makes sense. The problem is that if you zoom out, you see what disruption it's causing for Jews around the world. Surely the leadership can see this. Surely the leadership know that Hamas is not a Palestinian people in Gaza organization. Hamas don't even represent those people. Hamas represent the needs, the desires, and the actions of Iran and other nations who are unified in destroying Israel. Now, if the leadership of Israel can't see this, they're idiots. And we know that they're not idiots. So by provoking um, or their provoked response being what it is bound to trigger hatred towards the Jews around the world by those who already hate them. It gives them license to hate them because now they've become an easy target. Let me ask you a question in line of what I'm saying. Why haven't the Hamas leaders that are around the world outside of Gaza, in Abu Dhabi, the ones that visited in South Africa, the ones that are freely moving around the world with millions and millions of dollars donated to the Palestinian cause, why haven't they been assassinated?
And you're saying these people are known?
Very known. They were visiting here in South Africa. They know where they live. Why weren't they assassinated? I mean, the IDF, the Israeli military, the Mossad, they're very, very good at doing this. Why haven't they gone for the head of the snake? Why are they eating at the tail and just murdering so many people in Palestine? Not in Palestine, in Gaza. Because hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, their lives are being destroyed amongst the tens of thousands of people that are being killed. Now, I'm not saying any of them are guilty or innocent because we don't know who supports Hamas and who doesn't support Hamas. But they're not militants, they are civilians. Civilians aren't
But we know,
necessarily innocent, but that's not the point. The point is that they could have taken on a better strategy. Now, I'm not a war expert, but I'm standing on the outside going, and I'm just simply asking the question. If you know where the main leaders are, let's say, for example, apartheid 1975. Okay, and we have the ANC and we have Russia who's aligned with them and Palestinian, and we got the Cubans fighting wars on our border and stuff. But we know that there are 10 or 15 or 20 people who aren't in South Africa, they're not in Angola, they're not in it, but we know that they're living in Abu Dhabi or in London, living happily lives while they're instructing all their minions to go and get killed and kill other people. Do you not think that the South African, like let's say Nelson Mandela and Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma were the guys who are pulling the strings, the captains of the ANC's armed struggle, were now in London or in some country where the South African government and their military could get access to them to just go and kill them. Do you think they wouldn't have just done that? Of course they would have. So why hasn't Israel done that? Why hasn't Israel cut off the snake of the head? And I'm not saying the Israeli people because they don't make the decisions. Why hasn't Benjamin Netanyahu instructed the assassination of the kingpin terrorists of the Hamas organization? I don't know. I can't see any reason why he shouldn't have, because then the war would end. Or it certainly wouldn't be carrying on the way it is now.
hey, this is you know, it's funny because we know who's supporting Israel. I wonder why are these people not even fearing the allies of Israel? Because Israel is heavily funded by America.
I don't think
And
they
so
care
this
about the
enemy,
Israeli people. As much as I don't think Iran or Hamas or Hezbollah care about the Lebanese or they care about the Palestinians, I don't think they care about any of them. I think that the leadership has a bigger agenda. I think that Hamas were very, very successful in achieving their goal. They wanted to provoke a reaction that could be condemned worldwide, and they have provoked the reaction that can be condemned worldwide. Even people who support Israel blindly are now going, geez, like, can we carry on killing so many people? What is the goal here? Or do we have to admit that we actually are wanting to just actually get rid of everybody in Gaza, displace them or kill them? Because that looks to be what they're trying to do. And how can that be good? If you zoom out, if you know how big Israel is, the size of the Kruger National Park. You take the Kruger National Park, you put it in the Middle East, that's the size of Israel. But the Middle East and the Arab world is much, 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 much bigger than South Africa. And Kruger National Park's a tiny place in South Africa. So if you zoom out and you look at that big picture and you go, okay, Israel's just going to destroy everybody in Gaza because that's what they're doing, you don't think that the rest of the Arab world's going to lose their minds and come and try and kill you. How do they not know that this is going to happen? I don't think they even care about their own Israeli people. I really don't think that Benjamin Netanyahu cares about the Jewish people. I think he's more interested in his position in the global future. And that's sad because I'm empathetic to the Jewish people. Anyway, what have you got to say? Then I want to ask you a question.
No. Netanyahu for me is like a warrior. He's like a mercenary.
Okay.
When I look at his stance and how he's been continuing to ask for arms down and yet at the same time saying, I will defend my people. He's the one who's been the most vocal to actually even have this contradiction, a leader. You know, I haven't heard the other side calling for this peace as much. All I've been hearing is blame, pin Israel down. The spirit that's carried by the other side is to make Israel have no ability to move again. Like, that's all. But I hear Netanyahu calling for peace and at the same time saying, but I will defend myself. For me, that's a fair balance. You know, and I don't know the actions, if the actions speak to that desire in the public life.
It might be a fair balance. I don't know. It's so difficult to tell. You know, as I said, I'm not a master of war, but I'm trying to zoom out. If it was very simply Israel against another country, Israel against Egypt, Israel against Lebanon, Israel against Jordan, Israel against Iran, you could go, okay, that's a war between two countries. But this is not a war between two countries. This is a war between two ideas. So Israel doesn't stand alone. You've got the West supporting Israel. But then Hamas doesn't stand alone. You've got the East supporting Hamas. So what have I just described is the potential of world war. You know, you've got Iran, who is now aligned with Russia and China. Whether that'll last or not, I don't know. And then you've got Israel aligned with Britain and Europe and America.
Yeah.
And how is Israel going to win a war with 7 million people in total, men, women, children, young and old, and 2 million citizens who are there? I don't know if they will fight for Israel. Who knows? But you've got 7 million people against 1.2 billion. How are they going to survive that war without international intervention on such a scale that it cannot be anything else but a world war? How is Gaza going to survive against even just little Israel unless Iran, unless Lebanon, unless the Arab countries, including now Russia and China, interested in supporting them? There's no winners in this. There are no winners in this conflict ever. There's two ways to end this war. The first one,
a road to world war.
Say again?
I'm saying this is a road to some sort of a world war.
Potentially. You know, we've got Russia, Ukraine, that's one journey to war. Now we've got Israel-Palestine conflict, and it's actually against the nation of Israel, the state of Israel, against Gaza, who are a proxy for Iran.
Exactly.
So they're not fighting the Gazans, they're fighting Iran. Why are they focusing on the Gazans? It doesn't make military strength. It's like we are now in a bunker, and we have a whole army in front of us, and all of our soldiers in the bunker are focusing on one soldier. All of our guns are aimed at one soldier. Okay, he's dead. But while we focus on him, the others are going to come and kill us.
These are just sparks, Dean. These are just sparks to start the fire.
The fire's begun, yeah.
these areas are just sparks. Otherwise, the world is about to burn because this thing is everywhere.
Mm.
You know,
My
the
conspiracy
world.
theory is this. This is my conspiracy theory, and it's not a hypothesis. A hypothesis does not yet have evidence to support. This is a theory, and it's got a lot of evidence to support that there is a mechanism by the liberal elites, global elites from all around the world, who want to bring in a new order. And the mechanism is simple: divide and conquer. And out of the chaos,
Divide and conquer.
yeah, divide and conquer. And out of the chaos, you bring new order. Okay, so that's the theory. I believe that there's potentially, like there always has been, a couple of madmen, okay, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Hitler, whoever, okay, they've been there in history before. Now they've got global reach because we have a global village and global technology. They're going, okay, so what we want to do is, and they've admitted this, who they are even, many of them, what we want to do is create a new government and a new structure and a new better for all. Okay, now they can't collapse, they can't bring in the new system without collapsing the old. So the mechanism would be, let's divide, just create divisions. Divisions amongst people. Get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated. Just make people make decisions between bad ideas all the time and create division. Now that we've got the division, now so this is the evidence. We now have massive divisions based on literally very, very bad ideas. Okay? And when there's enough chaos, we'll just come in and save everybody, and people will beg us to actually do it. So it's divide and conquer, and out of the chaos, you bring a new order. And it might be the new world order or the global one world government or whatever. I don't know. But that seems to be what's happening because the war in Israel doesn't make sense. The way it's manifesting doesn't make sense. It doesn't. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu could have sent all of his troops, half of his troops to West Bank, other half of his troops to Gaza, pitched out there and said, okay, you've done what you've done. You put 1 foot over that border, we're going to annihilate you. We don't want to do that. But if you put one, then we're going to hit you as hard as hell. And while they've got that little distraction going on, they could have sent soldiers around the world. They knew exactly where the Hamas leaders were and assassinated them all. And then kind of just waited for the worms to crawl out the woodwork. But no, they were just a few days, and at the same time, before Israel had even responded, there were celebrations around the world called protests. There were celebrations of the massacre of October 7 around the world. Tens of thousands. Then it became hundreds of thousands. And then they started calling it protests after Israel started the bombing. But before they started the bombing, the protests, air quotes they call it, the protests were actually celebrations of the murderous acts of Hamas on October 7th. And then they converted into protests of the murderous acts of the response by the IDF and Israel.
Wow.
So that's my theory. I think that they want, Ukraine and Russia is not that different. How does Ukraine think they're going to beat Russia? Nobody's ever beaten Russia. They're going to beat Russia, really. And the rest of the world's going to have to stand in on proxy.
Again, Dean, I think we are coming back to that theory of a proxy, because even the Ukraine-Russia conflict, it doesn't look like a war between those two countries. It's like there is another country involved that is using a country,
How on earth is Ukraine expecting to win?
Like, it doesn't make sense. Why would Ukraine stand up to Russia?
And even if they win the war, how have the people of Ukraine won? They're being decimated. They're being destroyed. Zelensky, the president, prime minister, whatever position he holds, I don't know, I think president, he doesn't care about the Ukrainian people, because the only reason that Vladimir Putin could justify going in militarily is that they wanted to join NATO, which was against the pact. And he was saying, if you try and join NATO, I will invade you. If I will stop you. So NATO continues to invite Ukraine to the table, and the president, the bloody idiot, accepted the invitation, knowing that Vladimir Putin had already said, if you do that, I will have no alternative but to go military. I'm not saying Vladimir Putin's a good idea. He might have been licking his lips waiting for them to do it so that he could do it, but he was looking for license. So the
He might
only
have
way,
been
yeah, he might have been
looking.
sitting there licking his lips. I don't know. But because I don't, you can't proclaim that he's a good guy in this. But how's Zelensky a good guy when he is prepared to sacrifice his entire population to secure his position on the world stage with the new world order?
How's America going to help in these conflicts in these countries? Because everybody looks to America.
I don't know. I don't know if
I,
America
I,
can.
I hear Trump has got a new thing now on his campaign ticket that he will settle both wars,
I
Middle East
believe
and
he can
Ukraine.
because he'll get to the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter in Ukraine and Russia. I mean, if I think about it from all the stuff that I've seen and from what Vladimir Putin is saying and from what NATO is saying, it's really simple in that if I was Trump, if I was the president of the US, or if I was in a position to say so, I would go to Vladimir Putin and say, listen, ceasefire. I guarantee you they will not join NATO. Okay? I would go to Zelensky and I would say, ceasefire, because I guarantee you, you're not joining NATO. The war ends right there. Whoever has
The
authority
war
to say
ceased.
the war ends right there. Zelensky stops fighting and Putin stops fighting. Because if Putin then continues to fight, then it justifies NATO going in because they've already said they won't. And then they can go in full force.
And Trump promises to defund NATO.
Yeah, NATO, why is NATO there? We don't need NATO. They could change it to a different mandate. That's fine, but we don't need NATO for why it was set up there. It's ridiculous. And in terms of the war, I don't know how he would end the war in Israel. But I haven't worked through that. But the one in Ukraine, I think, is a lot simpler. I think it's a lot simpler. The average age of soldier in Ukraine used to be like 24. It's now 45 because all the youngsters are dead. They've had to recruit more
In
soldiers.
Ukraine.
The young people in
Where is that?
Ukraine, huh?
Where is that? Is that in Ukraine?
Ukraine. So your military is normally younger men. Okay, they're not old men. It's the younger men who go to war. All the younger men are dead. They've had to replace them with the older men to keep fighting. And now they're recruiting women because the men are dying.
So they are running out of people.
They're running out of soldiers.
Yeah, ne?
No,
It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. I think it leaves us in despair, really. There is no obvious
I feel
solution.
terrible for the Israeli people. I feel terrible
I
for
don't
the
even,
people living in Gaza. I feel terrible for the Ukrainians. I feel terrible for the Russians. You think the Russians want to go and do this? Because they're also dying. But what alternative do they have? If they retreat, they're like the Zulus. Like the Zulus, if you retreat, they kill you. You're not allowed to retreat if you're a Russian. You go or you die. You don't argue with the government.
what can be done with the biggest part of this conflict in the Middle East, which is religious? What can be done to reconcile the two?
Israel. Are you talking Israel?
I'm talking Israel, yeah, because I'm still off the idea that it's religious. It's religious and it's prophet.
It absolutely is religious. I don't know what can be done religiously. I think that'll have to work itself out. But, there was a question that I asked you yesterday if you could delete, because I saw it on, it was Gareth Cliff who reposted it, the radio guy. He's got his own thing now. If you could delete one country in the world, delete one country, you can press delete, one country disappears. Which country would it be? And Gareth Cliff kind of said, so who would you choose? Um, to save 7 million Jews, I would delete Israel. Now, the war in the region won't stop because the Arabs are all at war with each other as well. It's not as if now Israel leaves, the war in Syria stops, or Israel leaves and the war in Iraq or Afghanistan stops. No, the area will still be war torn because that's the area. But the 7 million Jews would live. It's the only country in the world that I think you could literally delete and have a positive impact on the world. And I'm empathetic to the Jews.
Exactly.
I'm
I mean,
empathetic to the Jews.
they have estate everywhere. They are not strangers anywhere.
No.
Jews are home wherever.
No, I don't know if
So
they're home, but at the moment they are the pigeon amongst the cats. And the rest of the world's trying to save the pigeon. I don't know if they're at home. Every country, they were thrown out of Spain, they were thrown out of England, they were thrown out of Poland, they were thrown out of Russia, they were thrown out of Germany, they were thrown out the Middle East. They now
Germany.
people in South Africa want to throw them out of South Africa. You know what I mean? So that where would they go? I don't know. Maybe America. Maybe America, but America's losing its mind as well. But at the moment, where they are is not helpful even to them. At the moment, they're able to defend themselves. They're able to put up a good fight, like Ukraine did in the
You know,
beginning. But what happens when the war gets bigger? Those civilians are dead.
the other thing also, Jews can be very arrogant wherever they are. I mean, let's note that also. These are not very friendly people.
No.
Just because we seem to favor their side and like them, they can be very, very arrogant.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why I will favor the Jew over the Muslim, okay? The moderate Muslims are silent and they're irrelevant. There isn't a moderate Muslim government in the world at the moment that has a democracy, okay, that isn't led by extremists, or at least levels of extremists. Now, the Muslim extremists, which are the most dominant, although they're not the most, that they aren't the majority, okay, they are the ones who, when they come to you and me, they say either you become a Muslim extremist or I'm going to cut your head off. The Jews aren't threatening to cut my head off. So when these extreme Muslim groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, the guys in Iran, when they finish with the Jews, they're coming after you and me. And either you're going to convert to Islam and their form of it, or they're going to cut your head off. How do I support them? That's what Hamas does.
Yeah, better a cold sweet than a hot one.
I don't know. There's no solution to this unless Israel.
No, there's no solution here.
No, Israel will never be accepted as a state by those. In which case, the war will continue. So that's why, if I could, I would delete Israel. Do they have the right to be there? Yes. Do they have the right to self-determine? Yes. Do I support that right? Yes. But how is it going to happen in the midst of an area where every one of your neighbors, even those at peace with you, are struggling to accept your existence?
Now, I'm thinking now, isn't this equivalent to us saying we could delete our hearts? Because Israel has been called the heart of the world.
Look, but the state of Israel, has only been there since 1948. We're not talking about delete their history. We're not talking about deleting the significance and the relevance of them as a people and of them as a nation. Okay, we're just talking about the question in my mind talks about if we can delete a country today, delete it. So what they are today, America's high on that list, by the way. America's more dangerous today than nearly any other country in the world. They're causing more trouble than anybody else almost. Who's proud of America? I look at them and I laugh at them and I think, are you guys all out of your minds? There was a time when other countries aspired to be like America. I don't want to be like America today. Are you mad? That you've got transgender people running things, and I don't have a problem with a transgender person in a position, but they're being glorified as transgender in their position. And now they got porous borders, and they their own poor people in their country they don't give money to, but the illegal immigrants that come in, they're giving them thousands of dollars and flying them all over the country. Or who would be
Yeah.
proud of that?
No, there isn't much to be proud of there.
And if
There isn't much
America
to be proud of
collapses,
there.
the world collapses.
But it seems though, Dean, that America is still the most generous to the countries around the world. There is no country that has displayed generosity as America have to others. You know, if you look at the amount they spend, I don't know if they do it because they have an interest. You know, America always has ulterior motives also. But just in terms of displaying progress and facilitating that progress in the world, uh, you have to give it to America
I
in
don't trust
terms
them.
of usefulness.
I don't trust why they're doing it. I'm skeptical. I'm not
Uh,
a cynic. I'm not cynical. I'm skeptical. You know, there's a lot of accusations that can be made about America that they've got no defense against. If they don't like a political leader in a specific country, and if that specific country has socio-economic political relevance to them, they will intervene. I mean, Zelensky is America's man in Ukraine. They put him in. They organized that he was there, and I don't trust them. So if they're giving money to countries and being generous, I don't think they're capitalists. They don't give money to anybody without an expected return on investment. I don't know if it's generosity.
of course,
I don't know if it's generosity. If it was generosity, there would be a lot more money going into African countries that are more peaceful and wanting to rebuild and doing it in a responsible way. That's not happening. The South Americas, I don't think, if the country's got nothing to offer them, and Trump's, and why should they give? But so in some ways, it's not a criticism. It's like, why must they be generous to the rest of the world? Who the hell made them God? I like what Trump says about that. If it's in our interest to do something, we'll do it. If it's not, why must we do it? We got to get something back for it because we got to sort our own problems out. And if we're solving the rest of the world's problems, but our country's falling apart, what's the good of it? And I think that's right. It's like I've got problems at home, and my children are on drugs, and they need my help, and my daughter's been raped, and my wife's been thrown out of her job and abused by her boss and stuff like that. And I go, oh, well, listen, don't worry about that. I've got bigger issues. I'm going to go, I got bigger fish to fry. I'm going to go and save the people in Tembelethu. Firstly, I'm not qualified to save the people in Tembelethu because I can't even look after my family. So if I go to Tembelethu, I'll probably destroy it. So
yeah,
why should America be the savior of everybody else? I don't trust why they do it, but at the same time, I don't think they should have to. I think they should get out of everyone else's business.
true, true. I agree because as much as America tends to look at helping those who are outside, there are always problems domestically that they are unable to address. So these are not perfect people who have swept the front of their
They're
own.
powerful, but they're not
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah.
And that's a
So
dangerous mix.
anyway, Mr. Hisek, I'm out.
Thank you. We'll chat soon.
Yeah, cheers, man.